The barn smelled like sweat and desperation. Lanterns hung from iron hooks, casting long shadows across the dirt floor. Outside, the Wyoming wind screamed through the cottonwoods, but inside, silence pressed down like a hand over a mouth. 40 men stood shoulder to shoulder, their faces half lit, half hidden. Some chewed tobacco, some stared at their boots. None of them spoke. At the front of the barn, on a raised platform of warped planks, 5 women stood in a line. They wore clean dresses, too clean for the circumstances. White cotton, pale blue calico, one in faded yellow. Their hands were clasped in front of them, trembling or still. Their eyes fixed on the floorboards or the far wall or nothing at all. A man in a black coat paced before them, his voice smooth as oil poured over glass. "Gentlemen," he said, spreading his arms wide, "you've traveled far, you've paid good money, and you're here because the frontier is a hard place for a man alone." He smiled, teeth flashing in the lamplight. "So let's not waste time." He gestured to the first woman. She was young, maybe 19, with golden hair pinned up neat and trembling lips. "This one's from Ohio. Clean family, knows her letters, cooks, sews, keeps a Christian home." A murmur ran through the crowd. A rancher in a wide-brimmed hat raised his hand. "How much?" $40. The rancher nodded. The man in the black coat marked something in a ledger. The blonde woman stepped down from the platform, her face blank, and followed the rancher toward the door. She didn't look back. The man in black moved to the second woman. "This one's a widow, 32 years old, strong back, good with livestock, no children." Another hand rose, another exchange. Another woman disappeared into the night. The third, the fourth. And then there was only one left. She stood at the far end of the platform, her arms wrapped tight around herself. Her dress was the same pale blue as the others, but it hung loose on her frame, like she'd lost weight and hadn't bothered to take it in. Her hair was dark, tangled, falling past her shoulders in uneven waves. Her face was turned away, her jaw clenched so tight it looked like bone. The man in black hesitated. He glanced at the remaining men in the barn, maybe 15 now, their numbers thinned, and his smile faltered, just for a second. Then he stepped toward her. "Now this one. Don't." Her voice was low, raw, like something dragged over gravel. She didn't look at him. The man in black cleared his throat. "This one's been difficult, but she's young enough, 23, and she's—" "I said don't." He ignored her. "She's got no family, no ties, been through a few rough years, but she'll settle down once she's got a firm hand guiding her." No one raised a hand. The silence stretched long and ugly. One man spat into the dirt and turned toward the door. Another shook his head and followed. The crowd thinned further, 10 men, 8, 6. The man in black's smile was gone now. His voice sharpened. "Come on, boys, she's got value, she can work, she can." "She's broken," someone muttered from the back. The woman flinched, just barely, her shoulders drew in tighter. The man in black tried again. $10, that's all I'm asking, $10 and she's yours." Still, no one moved. And then, from the shadows near the barn door, a voice cut through the silence. "I'll take her." Every head turned. A man stepped forward into the light. He was tall, lean, dressed in a dusty trail coat and worn boots. His hat was pulled low, but his jaw was clean-shaven, and his eyes, pale gray, steady, didn't waver. He looked maybe 35, maybe older, hard to tell, the kind of man who carried years in his bones instead of on his face. The man in black blinked. "You'll what?" "I'll take her." "You sure about that, mister? She's not." "I'm sure." The woman on the platform turned her head slowly and looked at him for the first time. Her eyes were dark, rimmed red from sleeplessness or crying or both. Her expression was unreadable, not hope, not relief, just emptiness. The man in the trail coat pulled a worn leather pouch from his coat and counted out 10 silver dollars onto the platform edge. The coins clinked, one by one, sharp and final. The man in black scooped them up fast, like he was afraid the offer might vanish. "Sold." He scribbled something in his ledger, then gestured to the woman. "Go on then, you're his now." She didn't move. The man in the trail coat stepped closer. He didn't reach for her, didn't grab her arm or bark orders. He just stood there, quiet, waiting. After a long moment, she stepped down from the platform. Her legs shook. She nearly stumbled, but caught herself. She walked toward him slowly, her arms still wrapped around herself, her gaze fixed on the ground. When she reached him, he turned and walked toward the barn door. She followed, a few paces behind. Outside, the wind hit them both like a cold slap. The SK. Y was black, scattered with stars. A wagon waited near the fence, hitched to two tired horses. The man climbed up onto the seat and waited. The woman stood beside the wagon, staring at it like it was a cliff edge. "You can sit up here," he said quietly, "or in the back, your choice." She didn't answer. After a moment, she climbed into the back of the wagon and sat against the side panel, knees pulled up to her chest. He didn't argue, he just flicked the reins and the horses started forward. They rode in silence. The barn disappeared behind them, swallowed by darkness. The wind carried the scent of sagebrush and dust. The wagon wheels creaked. The horses snorted softly. After a mile, maybe two, the woman spoke. "Why?" Her voice was barely audible over the wind. The man didn't turn around. "Why what?" "Why me?" He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Because no one else did." She laughed. It was a bitter, hollow sound. "That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got." She leaned her head back against the wagon panel and closed her eyes. Her hands were still trembling. The man kept his eyes on the road ahead. The stars wheeled overhead. The night stretched on, cold and endless. And somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. The ranch was small. A single-story cabin made of rough-cut timber, a barn that leaned slightly to the left, and a corral with a split-rail fence that needed mending. The land around it was dry, dotted with scrub and stone, stretching out toward distant hills that looked black against the pre-dawn sky. The man pulled the wagon to a stop near the cabin and climbed down. He walked to the back and lowered the gate. The woman sat where she'd been the whole ride, knees drawn up, head resting against the side panel. Her eyes were open now, but she wasn't looking at anything. "You can come inside," he said. "There's a bed, stove still warm." She didn't move. He stood there a moment longer, then nodded. "I'll leave the door open." He walked toward the cabin, boots crunching over the dirt. The door creaked as he pushed it open. A soft glow spilled out, lamplight, warm and steady. She sat in the wagon for another 10 minutes, maybe longer. The cold seeped through her dress. Her fingers ached. Finally, she climbed down, slow and stiff, and walked toward the open door. Inside, the cabin was plain but clean. A table with 2 chairs, a wood stove with a pot of coffee still simmering, a narrow bed in the corner covered with a patchwork quilt. The man stood by the stove, pouring coffee into a tin cup. He held it out to her. She stared at it, then at him. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said quietly. "They all say that." He set the cup on the table. "Then you don't have to believe me, but the coffee's there if you want it." She stepped inside, hesitant, like the floor might give way. She glanced around the room, looking for exits, for weapons, for anything that might help her survive. Her gaze landed on a rifle leaning against the wall near the door. The man followed her eyes. "You can take it if you want." She blinked. "What?" "The rifle, you can take it. Keep it by the bed if it makes you feel safer." She stared at him, searching his face for the trick, the lie, the trap, but his expression was steady, tired maybe, but honest. "Who are you?" she asked. "Name's Caleb Rourke." "Why did you buy me?" "I didn't buy you." "You gave him $10. "I gave him $10 so he'd stop talking." Caleb poured himself a cup of coffee and sat down at the table. "I'm not looking for a wife, or a servant, or anything else." She crossed her arms, still standing near the door. "Then what do you want?" "Nothing. Everyone wants something." He sipped his coffee, slow. "Maybe, but not from you." She laughed again, that same bitter sound. You're lying. Maybe I am, he set the cup down, or maybe I just figured you'd had enough of being wanted. Silence filled the cabin like smoke. She moved closer, just a step, her eyes narrowing. I don't even know you. No, he said, but I know you. Her breath caught. What? Caleb looked down at his hands. His jaw worked, like he was chewing on words he didn't want to say. Finally, he spoke. Your name's Willa Brennan. She went still, completely still, her face drained of color. How? I knew your father, Caleb said quietly. Samuel Brennan, he had a place outside Cheyenne. Good land, good man. Willa's voice was barely a whisper. He's dead. I know. Then you know it was your people who killed him. Caleb's head jerked up. My people. Union soldiers. Her voice shook now, rage bleeding through the cracks. They came in the night, said he was harboring Confederate sympathizers, said he was a traitor. They burned everything, the house, the barn. They shot him in the yard while I watched from the trees. Caleb's face went pale. Willa. I was 16. Her hands were shaking. I ran, I hid, and when I came back there was nothing left but ash. And bones. I didn't know. Yes, you did. She took a step toward him, her eyes blazing. You were there. The words hung in the air like a noose. Caleb closed his eyes. Yes. Willa's breath came fast and shallow. You remember. I remember. Then why didn't you stop them? I tried, his voice cracked. I tried, Willa. I told the lieutenant your father wasn't sheltering anyone. I told him it was a mistake, but he didn't listen. He wanted the land. He wanted an example. And you just let it happen. I was a private, 19 years old. I had no authority, no. You had a voice, she shouted. You had a gun, you could have done something. I know, Caleb stood, his hands trembling. I know, and I've lived with that every day since. Willa's chest heaved. Tears burned at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Why didn't you tell me? In the barn, why didn't you? Because I didn't think you'd come with me if you knew. She stared at him, her fists clenched. You're right, I wouldn't have. But you're here now. Because I had nowhere else to go, her voice broke, not because I forgive you. Caleb nodded slowly. I'm not asking you to. She turned away, her arms wrapping around herself again. She stood there for a long time, her back to him, her shoulders shaking. Finally she spoke, her voice raw. I don't want your pity. I'm not offering pity, Caleb said quietly. I'm offering a place to stay, food, safety, and when you're ready to leave, I'll take you wherever you want to go. She didn't answer. Caleb walked to the door and stepped outside, pulling it shut behind him. He sat down on the porch steps, his head in his hands, and listened to the wind. Inside, Willa sank onto the edge of the bed. She pulled the quilt around her shoulders and stared at the wall. She didn't sleep. 3 days passed. Willa stayed in the cabin. She didn't speak to Caleb unless she had to. She ate the food he left on the table. She slept with the rifle beside the bed, her hand always within reach of it. At night, Caleb slept in the barn. On the 4th morning, Caleb was mending the corral fence when he heard horses. He straightened, shading his eyes against the morning sun. 4 riders crested the hill to the east, moving slow and deliberate. They wore long coats and wide-brimmed hats. One of them had a badge pinned to his chest, glinting in the light. Caleb's stomach sank. He set down the hammer and walked toward the cabin. Willa. She appeared in the doorway, the rifle already in her hands. Who are they? Law, maybe. Maybe. Stay inside. She didn't move. If they're here for me. They're not. How do you know? Caleb didn't answer. He stepped off the porch and walked toward the approaching riders, his hands visible, his posture calm. The 4 men reined in their horses 10 yards from the cabin. The one with the badge, a tall man with a graying beard and cold blue eyes, leaned forward in his saddle. Caleb Rourke. That's right. Name's Sheriff Dalton. Came to ask you a few questions. Caleb's jaw tightened. He knew that name, knew that face. Dalton had been a lieutenant during the war, the same lieutenant who'd given the order to burn the Brennan farm. What kind of questions? Caleb asked. Dalton's eyes flicked toward the cabin. Heard you picked up a woman from Sullivan's barn 4 nights ago. So that woman's property of the state. She was sold under legal contract. There's no such thing as legal slavery anymore, Dalton, not since '65. Dalton smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Wasn't slavery, was an employment contract. She owes debts, debts that were transferred to whoever bought her contract. You bought it, Rourke. That means you're responsible for her. I'm not holding her. Then where is she? Caleb didn't answer. One of the other riders, a younger man with a scar across his cheek, shifted in his saddle. Maybe we should just take a look inside, Sheriff. Maybe you shouldn't, Caleb said. The young man's hand moved toward his gun. Dalton raised a hand. Easy. He looked back at Caleb. I'm not here to cause trouble, just here to make sure everything's in order. It is. Then you won't mind if we talk to her. I do mind. Dalton's smile faded. You protecting her, Rourke. I'm protecting my property. Funny, Dalton leaned back in his saddle. I seem to remember you being real soft during the war, always questioning orders, always trying to save folks who didn't deserve saving. Caleb's hands curled into fists. That was a long time ago. Not that long, Dalton's gaze hardened. You remember the Brennan place. Caleb's blood went cold. I remember you arguing with me that night, Dalton continued, telling me I was making a mistake, telling me Samuel Brennan was innocent. He chuckled. You were always too soft for the work, Rourke. That's why you never made it past private. And you made it to sheriff by burning innocent families. Dalton's smile vanished. Ed, careful. Why are you really here, Dalton? The sheriff leaned forward again, his voice dropping. Because word travels, and word is the woman you picked up, she's Samuel Brennan's daughter. Caleb's heart hammered in his chest, but he kept his face still. Now, Dalton said, I don't care what you do with her, but if she starts talking about what happened to her family, if she starts stirring up old ghosts, that's a problem. She's not stirring up anything. Good, then we understand each other, Dalton straightened. But just so we're clear, if she leaves this ranch, if she goes into town and starts asking questions, I'll have her arrested. And you too. On what charge? I'll think of something. So here's the question that changes everything. If you were Caleb, would you stand your ground, knowing it might cost you everything, or let her go to keep the peace? Take a breath. Think about what justice really costs. And if you're still with me, tap subscribe so you don't miss how this plays out. The 4 riders turned their horses and rode back toward the hills, dust rising in their wake. Caleb stood there, watching them go, his fists still clenched. Behind him, the cabin door creaked open. Willa stepped out onto the porch, the rifle still in her hands. He was the one, she said quietly. Caleb turned. Yeah. He gave the order. Yeah. Her knuckles were white around the rifle's stock. I should have shot him. And then what? Caleb asked. His men would have killed us both. Maybe that would have been better. No, Caleb said firmly, it wouldn't. Willa's eyes burned with unshed tears. He's still free, he's still wearing a badge, and my father's still dead. I know. So what are we supposed to do? Caleb looked toward the horizon where the dust was still settling. We survive, and we make sure he doesn't win. Willa shook her head. That's not enough. It's all we've got. She turned and walked back inside, slamming the door behind her. Caleb stood there for a long time, staring at the empty hills. That night, Caleb didn't go to the barn. He sat on the porch steps, his rifle across his knees, watching the dark hills. He didn't expect Dalton to come back tonight, but he didn't trust him either. Around midnight, the cabin door opened. Willa stepped out, wrapped in the patchwork quilt. She stood there for a moment, then sat down on the steps beside him. They didn't speak. The wind whispered through the dry grass. Somewhere in the distance, a night bird called. The stars turned overhead, cold and indifferent. After a long while, Willa spoke. "Why didn't you leave?" Caleb glanced at her. "Leave where?" "After the war, why didn't you just go somewhere else, start over?" He was quiet for a moment. "I tried, went to California for a year, worked on the docks in San Francisco, but it didn't help." "Why not?" "Because the ghosts came with me." Willa pulled the quilt tighter around her shoulders. "I know what that's like." "Yeah," Caleb said softly. "I figured you did." She looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time since she'd learned the truth. His face was lined with exhaustion, his eyes shadowed. He looked older than he was. "You really tried to stop them?" she asked. "I did." "Why?" "Because it was wrong." "That's it." Caleb nodded. "Sometimes that's enough." Willa's throat tightened. It wasn't enough to save him. "No," Caleb's voice cracked. "It wasn't." She looked away, blinking hard. "I used to dream about finding the men who did it, hunting them down, one by one, making them pay. And now? Now I don't know," she exhaled slowly. "I'm tired, Caleb, I'm so tired." He didn't say anything. He just sat there, steady and quiet, like a stone in a river. After a while, Willa spoke again. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing." "Everyone wants something." "I told you." "I know what you told me." She turned to face him. "But no one does something for nothing, so what is it? Forgiveness? Absolution? A clean conscience?" Caleb met her gaze. "I don't expect forgiveness, and I don't deserve absolution." He looked back toward the hills. "I just wanted to give you a choice, that's all." "A choice?" "Yes, stay or go, sleep or keep watch, trust or don't trust, your choice." Willa stared at him for a long time. Then, slowly, she leaned back against the porch post and closed her eyes. "I'm not ready to forgive you," she said quietly. "I know. But I'm not ready to leave, either." Caleb nodded. "Okay." They sat there in silence, two broken people under a sky full of stars, carrying ghosts they couldn't bury. And for the first time in 7 years, Willa felt something other than rage. It wasn't peace, not yet. But it was close. The next morning, Caleb found her in the barn, mucking out stalls. She didn't ask for the work, she just started doing it. He didn't comment, he just picked up a shovel and worked beside her. They didn't talk much, but every so often, their eyes would meet across the barn, and something unspoken passed between them. Not forgiveness, but maybe the beginning of it. That afternoon, Caleb rode into town for supplies. When he came back, Willa was standing in the yard, staring at something in her hands. He climbed down from the wagon. "What is it?" She held it up, a small wooden cross, weathered and cracked. "I found it in the barn, in a box under the hay." Caleb's face went pale. "Willa." "It's his, isn't it?" Her voice shook. "My father's." Caleb nodded slowly. "After the fire I went back. I buried what was left. I made that cross. I didn't know where else to take it, so I kept it." Willa's eyes filled with tears. "You kept it?" "I didn't know if you were alive, but I thought, if you ever came back, you'd want something to remember him by." She stared at the cross, her hands trembling. Then she looked up at Caleb, and for the first time, there was no anger in her eyes. Just grief and gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. Caleb nodded, his throat tight. Willa walked toward the edge of the property, where the land sloped down toward a stand of cottonwoods. She knelt in the dirt and pressed the cross into the ground, her hands smoothing the earth around it. Caleb stood a few paces behind her, silent. When she finally stood, she turned to him. "I'm not leaving." He blinked. "You don't have to." "I know, but I'm not." She wiped her eyes. "I'm staying, for now at least." Caleb nodded, okay. And Caleb, yes. Thank you for not forgetting him. He swallowed hard. I couldn't if I tried. They walked back to the cabin together, side by side, as the sun sank low on the horizon. 2 weeks later, Sheriff Dalton came back. This time, he brought 8 men. They rode up at dawn, surrounding the cabin before Caleb even had time to load his rifle. Dalton dismounted and walked to the porch, his hand resting on the butt of his pistol. Time's up, Rook. Caleb stepped outside, unarmed. What do you want? The woman, she's coming with me. On what charge? Vagrancy, failure to fulfill contract obligations. Take your pick. Willa appeared in the doorway, her face set. I'm not going anywhere. Dalton smiled. That's not your choice, sweetheart. Don't call me that. You're coming with me, one way or another. Caleb stepped between them. She's not breaking any laws. I say she is, and I'm the law here. Not for long. The voice came from behind them. Dalton spun around. A dozen riders crested the hill, ranch hands, townspeople, men Caleb had worked with over the years. At the front was an older man with a grey beard and a weathered face. His name was Garrett, and he owned the largest ranch in the county. Garrett reined his horse to a stop and looked down at Dalton. Heard you were making trouble, Sheriff. Dalton's jaw tightened. This is official business, Garrett. Official business? Garrett spat into the dirt. You mean harassing a man on his own land, threatening a woman who's done nothing wrong? She owes. She doesn't owe you a damn thing. Garrett leaned forward in his saddle. And everyone here knows what you did during the war, burning families out of their homes, calling them traitors so you could steal their land. Dalton's face flushed red. That was still happening, far as I can see. Garrett gestured to the men behind him. Now, you can ride out of here peacefully, or we can have a conversation about whether you're fit to wear that badge. Dalton's hand hovered over his pistol. You threatening me? I'm telling you the truth. Garrett's voice was steady. Ride out, Dalton, while you still can. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Dalton cursed under his breath, turned, and climbed back onto his horse. His men followed, glancing nervously at the line of riders. As they rode away, Garrett tipped his hat to Caleb. You're a good man, Rourke. Don't let men like him make you forget that. Caleb nodded, his throat tight. Thank you. Garrett smiled. Thank Willa. She's the one who rode out to my place 3 nights ago and told me what was happening. Caleb turned to Willa, his eyes wide. You did. She shrugged. You said we survive. I figured we'd need help to do it. Caleb laughed, a raw, breathless sound. You could have told me. And you would have tried to stop me. Damn right I would have. She smiled, just a little. That's why I didn't. The riders dispersed, heading back to their ranches and homes. Caleb and Willa stood in the yard, watching them go. When they were alone again, Willa turned to him. I'm sorry. Caleb frowned. For what? For blaming you for all of it. She took a breath. You couldn't have stopped what happened. I know that now. Willa. But you tried, and you've been trying ever since. Her eyes shone. That matters. Caleb's chest tightened. I don't know if it's enough. It's enough for me. They stood there for a long moment, the wind stirring the dust around their feet. Then Willa stepped forward and hugged him. Not tightly, not desperately, just gently. Caleb froze. Then slowly, he wrapped his arms around her and held on. When they finally pulled apart, Willa wiped her eyes. I'm still not ready to forgive everything, but I'm ready to try. Caleb nodded. That's all I'm asking. 3 months later. The ranch didn't look so empty anymore. The corral fence was mended. The barn stood straight. A small garden grew beside the cabin, rows of beans and tomatoes pushing up through the soil. Willa had planted them herself, her hands steady and sure. She still had nightmares. Some nights, Caleb would wake to the sound of her crying in the cabin, But other nights, she slept peacefully, the rifle back on the wall instead of beside her bed. They worked side by side most days. Caleb taught her how to shoe a horse. Willa taught him how to make bread that didn't taste like sawdust. They didn't talk about the past much, but sometimes, at night, they'd sit on the porch and share stories, small things, quiet things, memories that didn't burn. One evening, as the sun set over the hills, Willa turned to Caleb. "Do you think he'd be proud of me, my father?" Caleb looked at her, at the strength in her eyes, the steadiness in her voice. "Yeah, I think he would." She nodded, her gaze distant. "I think so too." Near the cottonwoods, the wooden cross still stood, weathered but unbroken. Willa visited it every week, leaving wildflowers at its base. And every time she walked back to the cabin, Caleb was there, waiting. Not as penance, not as guilt, just as family. Years later, travelers passing through would sometimes stop at the ranch. They'd see the man and woman working together, their movements easy and familiar. They'd see the garden, the mended fence, the smoke rising from the cabin chimney. And they'd wonder how two people so broken had managed to build something whole. But Caleb and Willa never told the full story. Some ghosts were meant to be carried quietly. Some redemption was measured in small acts, not grand gestures. And some families were built not from blood, but from choices made in the dark. The wind whispered through the cottonwoods, the stars turned overhead, and in the valley below, two people who had once been strangers stood side by side, watching the sun dip low over the hills. The past would always be there, a shadow at their backs. But the future, uncertain, fragile, hard one, stretched out before them like an open road. And for the first time in a long time, they were ready to walk it together.